My name's Dr. Thomas Webb, and I'm a doctor in Australia working in longevity medicine, performance. I've been a sports medicine doctor, and over the last several years, I've helped hundreds of high-performing professionals, CEO, entrepreneurs mainly, helping them improve their energy, recovery, focus, and long-term performance. I also completed an International Olympic Committee diploma in sports medicine, worked as a sports medicine doctor for a semi-professional Aussie Rules team. But honestly, the reason any of this matters is because a few years ago, my own life became completely chaotic internally, despite everything looking functionally okay externally. I was progressing in my career as a doctor, just stepped up to medical registrar, but my dopamine system was overstimulated, my routines were collapsing repeatedly, and my thinking felt scattered. I was basically having a quarter-life crisis. That's kind of what it felt like. And at one point I actually ended up living in a van during what I can only describe as a complete internal reset period. And honestly, I understand that state personally. So what actually changed in my life was realizing that most people are not failing because they are lazy or ill-disciplined, and this is especially true for high performers, for doctors. They're failing because their nervous system, environment, and daily habits are quietly pulling them towards chaos without them fully noticing it. And the modern world makes this incredibly easy. Over time, many people begin living in a state of constant mental reactivity without fully realizing how much it is affecting them. Their attention is continuously being pulled from one thing to another. They rarely spend time alone with their own thoughts, and even moments of rest become filled with stimulation, scrolling, background noise, or passive consumption, just as a way to distract themselves. And eventually this creates a feeling that is difficult to describe precisely, but very familiar to anyone who has experienced it properly. Life starts feeling mentally cluttered all the time, just a constant feeling of chaos, constant feeling of being reactive. And you're technically resting, but your brain never fully feels recovered. You might sit down to relax, yet still feel internally busy, still feel switched on all the time. Your thinking becomes noisier, your ability to focus deeply weakens, and even simple routines begin feeling harder to maintain consistently because your nervous system never fully settles back to baseline. And to no one's surprise, you constantly feel like you need some huge reset to finally get your life together. I don't know if you feel like this, but you kind of just crave this big, massive reset. And you want to change your life through this really intense, monk-like period. But in reality, this period may never come, and this is not what they need. What they actually need is stability. They try extreme routines, huge productivity systems, massive life overhauls, and those things usually work for about 10 days before collapsing again because the system underneath them was never stable enough to support them in the first place. And to be honest, this is kind of what happened to me when I felt like I needed a massive overhaul. So I had this big quarter-life crisis and moved into a van. I craved this big reset period. But this wasn't the thing that actually fixed me. Now, obviously, this is something I go much deeper into inside my program, which is going to be personalized to whoever I work with, where I break down how to actually identify your root cause behind these patterns and rebuild the underlying systems properly from the ground up, completely dependent on where you are at the moment. So rather than just relying on temporary motivation or surface level fixes. So the goal here is not just short-term improvement. The goal is creating a level of consistency, clarity, and performance that actually lasts long-term, not just years, but through decades and through your whole career. So for this video, I'll provide you with some very important and useful techniques which fundamentally can reshape your life and rebuild your energy and clarity. So what actually changes your life is rebuilding basic structure consistently enough that your brain and body start functioning properly again. And in my experience, you do not need 6 hours a day to begin doing that. For most people, one intentional 30-minute block, repeated consistently, is enough to completely change the direction of your life over time. Because the goal here is never perfection. The goal is regaining enough control over your attention, energy, behavior, and environment. So if someone came to me feeling mentally overwhelmed, inconsistent, distracted, and disconnected from themselves, this is where I would tell them to start. The first thing I would focus on is reducing noise. Most people underestimate how overstimulated they have become. From the moment they wake up, their brain is flooded with notifications, short form content, emails, constant information, and endless dopamine spikes that keep the nervous system in a reactive state all day long. And when your attention is constantly fragmented, your thinking becomes fragmented too. You don't have that clarity in thought. So part of rebuilding your life is creating periods where your brain is no longer consuming constant input. You actually take time to just sit there, block out the noise, and process your thoughts. So this can be as simple as walking without your phone, waking up and not going on your phone for the first 30 minutes of the day, or even just taking 10 minutes to sit outside in the middle of the day without your phone, without stimulation. Or it could be going to the gym, going for a run without stimulation as well. So giving your mind space to settle instead of continuously feeding it more information. That sounds quite simple, but neurologically it is incredibly powerful because your brain cannot regain clarity if it never experiences that feeling of stillness, if it never gives it that chance to process your thoughts and what you're thinking. The second thing I would focus on is movement, not because you need the perfect fitness routine immediately, but because physical movement is one of the fastest ways to change your physiology, improve your mood, improve your focus, increase your stress, resilience, and energy regulation. When people feel mentally overwhelmed, they often stop moving consistently, which makes the problem even worse because stress stops having an outlet. So instead of chasing that perfect workout plan, I would focus on consistency first. So start off small, break it down into its simplest form, whether that's a walk, a very short workout, basic cardio, basic run, anything that teaches your brain and body that momentum is returning again. And the third thing I would focus on is rebuilding control over your attention. One of the biggest hidden problems today is that most people no longer direct their attention intentionally. So their attention gets pulled everywhere by algorithms, notifications, and constant stimulation. Over time, this destroys your ability to focus deeply. Improving your life is relearning how to focus on one thing at a time again. Reading for 20 minutes without checking your phone, writing your thoughts down on a journal, or planning your day intentionally instead of reacting to it. Even small periods of uninterrupted focus begin retraining your brain surprisingly quickly. And the fourth thing I would focus on is rebuilding trust in yourself. Because when people repeatedly fail to maintain routines or follow through on goals, they eventually stop trusting their own ability to change. And once that happens, motivation drops dramatically because your brain no longer believes your actions will be consistent anyway. So instead of setting huge goals immediately, I would focus on small behaviors repeated daily. Not because small goals are exciting, but because repeated follow through changes your identity. It gives you a different impression of who you are. You are actually someone that follows through on your intentions, and that is what builds confidence. So the fifth thing I would focus on is creating rhythm. Rhythm should not be underestimated. Human beings function far better when sleep, movement, food, light exposure, and recovery becomes relatively predictable. But modern life pushes people towards complete randomness, chaos, and being reactive. People sleep at different times every night, especially doctors with your shift work, with long shifts at the weekend, 9 to 5s in the middle of the week, and then maybe you got nights. So your circadian rhythm is never properly regulated, and this is a big problem, of course, because if you don't have consistency in your sleep, it's very hard to maintain consistency in your other habits as well. And the problem is if you're not sleeping well, you're not able to recover mentally and physically well as well. So part of rebuilding your life is introducing simple forms of stability again. Even when you can't control what shifts you're on, you can control simple things like getting morning sunlight as much as you can, or morning light even when you wake up during a night shift after sleeping in the day. You want to get that light exposure as best you can. You want to get regular movement, you want to get structured recovery. And these things sound basic, but they have enormous effects on your mood, focus, stress, and overall mental clarity. And honestly, this was exactly the process that rebuilt my own life after that chaotic period. I stopped trying to transform myself overnight and instead focused on stabilizing my biology and behavior through simple systems repeated consistently over time. It wasn't changing something massive straight away. Every time I tried to do that previously, I would just fail and go back to square one. So it's about small changes over a consistent period of time. And eventually my thinking became clear, my energy improved, became more stable, and I regained the ability to execute consistently without constantly feeling mentally scattered or emotionally overwhelmed. This is what I think most people actually want. Not extreme productivity, not perfection, but just some clarity, energy, stability that they can rely on, and a sense that they are directing their own life again instead of constantly reacting to it. And the good news is that rebuilding that is often much simpler than people think. It starts with giving your brain and body enough structure to function properly again. If you want help implementing this properly, that's designed specifically for doctors, from my own experience in myself and what worked for me and what works for the people that I've worked with, then you can click on the link in the description and we can have a chat and set you up properly. Hope you got value from this video, and if you're a doctor that wants more performance, health, longevity, burnout, etc. tips, then feel free to follow along. See you on the next one.